In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Drew Hill, joined as always by Chris Herrington. I don't know when this pod will come out, but it is lottery night. The NBA lottery happened, draft lottery happened earlier today. The league did its official tankathon spin. They should just do that. Just press the button one time.
Right.
And the Memphis Grizzlies, your Memphis Grizzlies, if you're listening to this podcast, are picking third overall. A massive, massive win for the franchise to jump up to number 3 from what was most likely to be pick number 7. Really interesting way it all shook out. All kinds of stuff to talk about, but a day of celebration in Memphis. A day we needed in Memphis.
Yeah.
The Grizzlies jumping up in the draft lottery. Something to get excited about, you know? And it was funny because I was looking online and some of the people that are just still like anti-rebuild were like, man, I just don't want to have to be sold this bill of, I just don't want to have to be sold about these new draft prospects and blah, blah, blah. And then like a few hours later, felt like everybody was all in. Number 3 pick. Let's go.
It's a great year to have the third pick. And you never know what's going to happen. No one can predict the future. You're talking about the future of young basketball players. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. But in terms of the way we thought about it going into it, obviously you always want to jump up. And you want to jump up as high as you can, right? It would look great to be number 1 because then you get your pick. But this is a great year to jump up to number 3. This is not a draft where there's a tier break and we jumped up, you're below the break, right? When the Grizzlies jumped up to number 2 in, I think it was 2009, Blake Griffin was the consensus number 1 pick in that draft. That was the big prize. Then after that, there was other good prospects, and you jumped up to right below the tier break, and then they screwed it up by drafting James Embiid. But like, it's not that kind of draft. It's not last year where everyone really wanted to be number 1 to get Cooper Flag, and then there were plenty of good players after that, but there's a break there. This was a year where from the jump, everyone said and everyone agreed there's three prospects in this draft who in an average year might be a number 1 overall pick. And by the time we got to the lottery, a lot of people think it might be 4. And so you get into that top 3. If you believe it's a 3-person draft, you're going to get one of those 3 players. If you believe it's a 4-person draft in terms of the top tier, you get a choice among 2 of those players. It's just a great year to jump up. And for a team that had decided that it was that they were embarking on this rebuild, and yes, they had Cedric Coward, and yes, they have Zach Edey, but they didn't have what you really consider a tentpole player. This gives them an opportunity, no guarantees, but gives it an opportunity right out of the gate to add a tentpole player, to add a player that can be what you build around, that can help drive the identity in the direction of your franchise. It's, I mean, my cliche or whatever, and what I wrote was that, they finished third, but it was more like a gold medal than a bronze medal in terms of how it felt.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with everything you said there. I went back and looked, and I think we had, with some of what we wrote, we had echoed some of the same things. I put a quick story up and wrote through and did a whole new story. So you can go back to the Daily Memphian site and read a more thorough lottery story if you go check it again. But, I think one of the things I pointed out was what Zach Kleiman said after the trade deadline, which was he hopes that this isn't a 5-year try to be terrible type of thing. We got a real chance to expedite the process a little bit here when you get a top 3 pick, because we both have underlined, drafting in the first round usually brings pretty modest return. There's more busts than there are hits in the NBA draft in the first round. But the top 3, that's a different story. Go back from 2019 to 2023. You can't really include 2024, 25 because you can't expect players to be an all-star in their first or second season. But from 2019 to 2023, 8 out of the 15 players drafted in the first three picks of the NBA draft have gone on to be NBA All-Stars. It's like 50%.
Well,
A little better.
the top four from last year's draft are on that track already.
Yeah.
They haven't made it yet, but they're all on that track, all four of them. When you talk about Flagg, Harper, Edgecombe, and Con Kneppel, right? I mean, that's four. That's the top four in that draft. And again, there are misses. The Grizzlies have been there. Hasheem Thabeet, second overall.
Hey, you could have the 2024 draft class. None of those
Yeah.
guys look like they're going to be All-Stars anytime soon.
I don't think there's a Hasheem Thabeet in the top four of this draft. I don't know if all four of those guys will be All-Stars, but all four have clear All-Star potential, and all four have, I think, are very likely to be very good NBA players. All four of them.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty a little bit, and I think you have some questions prepared, Chris. Just what was your initial reaction when you saw? I mean, you texted me. I responded pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I did go back and watch the video from inside the lottery drawing room, and Zach Kleiman essentially had no reaction at all.
Right.
And it was funny because I think I don't know who they were. I assume they were general managers. The rep from the Kings and the rep from the Jazz were sitting directly to his right, I believe. And both of them like immediately turned and fist bumped him. But like Zach was just stone face, no reaction at all. And then, but it's a franchise altering decision that comes. I was a little surprised that there was absolutely no reaction from him.
Well, it's interesting. The way it's plays out in that room and the way it plays out on television are literal opposites, right? In terms of how it's done. And so apparently the first drawing for the third pick came out Utah, but Utah had already drawn the second pick.
You can go watch it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they draw again. And so at that point, when they're drawing the third pick, you just know you didn't get the top two because you start at one in their actual drawing. And so it's sort of open to everybody. The perspective of watching it the way most people experienced it on the broadcast, it was sort of a setup for disappointment, and then you get the surprise because the most likely pick for the Grizzlies was not 6 going into the lottery; it was 7. We've talked about it and we've written about. There was
second most likely being 8.
Was 8 more likely than 7?
Yes. Oh no, the second most
7.
likely being 8.
Yeah, right. So the most likely pick was 7. The second most likely was 8. And that's because the collective odds of the teams below them in that 8 to 14 range to jump up would push them down. And so you're going through and you're happy, like you're very happy Golden State's not jumping up and you're happy Oklahoma City's not jumping up, right? Those are the things you really didn't want. But then Chicago jumps up and that's it. That's the thing that happens that pushes you down. So at that point, when Chicago jumps up, if you're following the math of this, as a Grizzlies fan, you're like, okay, we're probably going to be 7. There's a chance we're 8. Let's hope we're not 8. The odds of being 7 from the perspective of watching it increase when Chicago jumps up. And then for the Grizzlies to jump up too. So you're set up, you're sort of steeling yourself for disappointment to get pushed down by Chicago. And then you follow right behind them and jump up.
Yeah, I did.
So it was I labeled lottery outcome in franchise history.
Yeah. No, I tried to capture that in what I wrote in the write through because that was it, right? It was like everybody was a little sweating bullets, it felt like, about the OKC pick.
Yeah.
Like, God, please not in the top 4 for OKC. That one comes across, and you're like, I'm sure everybody's looking down, texting their friends, going, thank goodness if you're not a Thunder fan. And then immediately after that, they're just going rapid fire. And they're like, Chicago moved up. First thing that pops in my head is, okay, 7. It's going to be 7.
It seemed like they did it more quickly than they have in the past. I felt that way.
I mean, they filibustered for 15 minutes on TV.
And then they start doing the envelopes, and like I was trying to write it down. I just like slow myself down.
Like they didn't. The whole thing is silly, and I understand they're trying to make it a 30-minute television product and sell advertisements. I get that. Like I'm not against them, trying to make money off the lottery. It makes sense why the NBA would want to do that. But I think they'd be better off to just do the lottery pool at the beginning and then talk about what happened than like to try to build the suspense. I guess they're hoping people just sit on the broadcast for a longer period of time, but I don't know. It just the interviews, like the one question interviews with all the players from the lottery, I don't know. It just felt like we could have just gotten straight to it. And then when they actually did get to the things, the card pulls, Mark Tatum's up there just ripping through them like
Yeah,
every 5 seconds. So by the time I had processed, oh, the Bulls are in the top four, like that means the Grizzlies are probably going to be seven.
right,
They had already pulled the Kings card, and it was like
right.
Grizzlies are now in the top in the top
Yeah, no,
four.
no, no, you're right. It was a quick mental process you had to go through because it's a great moment for the Grizzlies to jump up. Other than jumping up from eight to two in a draft that had a clear top two at that point in Zion and Ja, this is at least the second best lottery outcome the franchise has ever had.
So, Chris, I think you had some questions that you wrote down in the post lottery dust
Yeah,
settling.
yeah. Thinking about it, to me, I could sort of have four questions related to the Grizzlies based on the outcome of the lottery. And my first question is not who will the Grizzlies take at three. That's an obvious question, but I want to start broader than that. What is the choice the Grizzlies will be making at three? And I want to see if we can stipulate a couple things to narrow this down. Can we agree that AJ DeBanza will not be a part of the choice because he's going to go one or two? We agree on that.
Based on the fact that it's Utah at two,
Yeah,
I just don't think there's any possible way he's getting past Utah, and I would agree.
right. So let's say DeBanza is not part of the choice. Can we agree on the opposite end that the Grizzlies are not going to reach, quote unquote, reach for one of these guards, a Wagler, a Acuff, or Flemings, that they're going to take one of these top four guys?
I don't know if we can agree on that.
Really? Interesting.
I think we can agree on that. They've surprised us in the past.
Well, for the sake of argument, let's agree on that. And let's
Okay.
say that leaves three players, right? That leaves Peterson, Boozer, Wilson. Two of those guys are going to be on the board. I think everyone's initial, you look at every mock draft, they all say this, and it was my initial reaction too. Everyone's initial reaction was, okay, DeBance's going one. Peterson, if DeBance's one, Peterson's two, because Utah just traded for Jaren Jackson Jr. and they already have Laurie Markkinen, and they can't take another power forward, so they're going to take Peterson. I think that's probably right. But what if Utah like trades up to one and takes DeBanza?
That's the thing.
Are we sure Washington is taking Peterson at two? Because like Boozer might be a good fit with Alex Sarr, right?
Well, I think there's two ways that this can kind of get off of the path that I think you're suggesting that somehow, in some order, it will be DeBanza and Peterson. I think the first way you've already mentioned is like, the owner of the Jazz is connected to BYU, who paid DeBanza an outrageous amount of money to go play college basketball. I think it's no secret the Jazz would be thrilled if they could somehow get AJ DeBanza. And owners sometimes do things that they want their franchise to do, and ultimately they're the ones that make the decision. So if I was Washington, the first thing I would do is dangle that draft pick and say, "You really want AJ DeBanza, your guy that plays down the street? That I that's the first thing I would do, and I would see what Utah's willing to part with in order to make that switch. If I still felt good about Darren Peterson at number two, so there's that. There's that part of it. That's one way I think that maybe the order gets mixed up because if you do switch spots, then and it's DeBanza, then I don't know for a fact Peterson's going to go second
Right.
to Washington. The other way would be if Washington truly feels incredibly strong about DeBanza, and that's their guy, and that's certainly a real possibility. And then behind them is Utah, and I think you're right about the positional stuff, but I also I was reading some of the Jazz beat writer reaction afterwards. And there seems to be some belief that the Boozer is the type of player that they would like, and that they would actually be interested in a player like Boozer.
Right.
I think maybe there's a chance Utah would go with Boozer at number two, and maybe that switches things up. But those are the two scenarios that I see. I don't really see many others.
So if we agree that DeBanza's off the board at three, and we agree for now the Grizzlies are not going to entertain one of these point guards, they're looking at these top tier guys. That leaves three potential choices they'll face. It could be a Cam Boozer or Caleb Wilson choice, which was I think most people's first reaction. But if Boozer goes in the top two, it could be a Darren Peterson or Caleb Wilson choice. And then less likely it would be Wilson goes in the top two, and then it's a Darren Peterson or Carlos or Cameron Boozer choice. I don't really want to do the debate of who the Grizzlies should choose among those pairings because we have a month and a half to do draft stuff. but I'm interested in what the choice is. How would you power rank the likelihood of those choices? Would you agree that it's most likely they're looking at a Boozer versus Wilson choice?
Yes. Yeah, that I would power rate that first, and then
And then Peterson versus Wilson because Boozer's
Peterson
the guy who goes
versus
top two?
Wilson second. Although, there's going to be a lot of smoke between now and then, and
Yeah,
there always
yeah,
is, because there's going to be smoke screens by some of these teams. You never know. Maybe like now we're getting real crazy. Maybe Memphis really does like one of those guards, like an awful lot.
right.
Are we going to rule out the possibility that you don't just slide back 2 spots and just get another haul of things and then take Keaton Wagler? Like, I don't know. It seems outrageous, but like, I'm not ruling that out either. So yeah, you're right. We have a long way to go.
Yeah.
We'll do a Boozer versus Wilson
Yeah, yeah, no,
pod.
no,
We
no.
should.
We'll get deep on that stuff. That's why I don't want to get deep into it right now. I'm
Let's
just,
not do that right now.
yeah, I'm just interested in what the choice is going to be in terms of what they're weighing against each other. And so I think everyone's assumption was, oh, Boozer versus Wilson. We don't know if that'll be the choice that they're having to make.
I'll be fascinated to see if Washington tries to trade with Utah. I
So
think it's possible.
my second question on my four, and it's related to my third, but I'm gonna separate them out and stick at number two here. Let's assume right now that the Grizzlies are taking a player at 16. They're taking a player at 16. How does jumping up into the top four impact maybe what they do at 16? Have you thought about that at all?
I mean, maybe a little bit. I think maybe we might be stepping on the next question if we talk about it. But, you know, if you have a player that you view as like a potential all-star level talent that's already banked, I think you can maybe afford to go for a positional need a little bit more
Right.
with the second pick at 16. Or you could try to leverage that pick and get really aggressive and try to get back up in the draft and see what you can do from there. Um,
Yeah,
which
that
the
that
Grizz-
that, that, that was going to be my third question about
yeah,
the trade up possibility.
I think they go hand in hand a little bit though.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, they do.
yeah,
I think it's interesting to think about 16 after you have three. Are you still strictly going best player available, or is the positional stuff going to impact what you do? Because I do think my read, and I haven't done my rankings yet. I was going to do that next week, after the combine. But my general read is I think the once you get into that right outside the lottery range, 16 is where they're picking, but go like 14 to 18, 14 to 19, that range. I feel like the talent is a little bit stronger in the front court than in the back court there. Because guys I really like Morez Johnson, like Heinz Steinbach, guys that other people maybe like more than me, but are, guys like Koa Pete, guys like Alan Graves. Those are the kind of guys who are there. I think the point guards are probably all gone at that point, right? Maybe even a LeBaron Philon. Maybe they're just all gone at that point. And it feels like if you're going guard at 16, you're in a situation where it feels like you're going to reach. I've seen a mock draft already if the Grizzlies taking Christian Anderson at 16, and I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I don't feel like you have to take a guard just because you're taking, if you're taking Boozer at 3. So I think the positional thing is interesting because I think it might put them in a position of either duplicating front court stuff with the pick they take at 3, whether that's Wilson or Boozer, if it's one of those two, or reaching a little bit for a guard. But, I don't know. Maybe it's a wing. Maybe it's a Swain. Maybe it's a Carr. We can get into all that over the next few weeks. But I'm interested in, if they pick at 16, how much that pick is swayed by what they do at 3.
it really is interesting how much the lottery just changed the way this draft will be covered for this Grizzlies because
Yeah.
it went from a debate that included all kinds of different players to now what will likely be an argument between 2 or 3 different guys, and then a lot of talk about 16 because there's not going to be a whole lot
Well,
of variety at 3. It
well,
feels
that's the question 3, the trade up thing, right? Because Zach Kleiman has, as we both know, as most listeners know, Zach Kleiman has a history of trading up in the draft. He's done it. I'm making up a number, but it feels like 80% of the time. Like, Coward was a trade up. Edie was not. Morant was not. But like all these other guys are trade ups. Coward was a trade up, and Bain was a trade up, and Clark and Aldama, and on and on. Zaire Williams, it didn't work out. On and on and on. Jake LaRavia, David Roddy. Like all these were trades. A lot of them were trade ups within the draft. The way this draft was structured, if the Grizzlies had stayed in that 6, 7, 8 range, I think it would have been very, very hard to trade into the top 4 from there, right? Now they don't have to. They're in the top 4. But now the question is, Now that you've jumped up, you have gotten this number third overall pick through luck. You haven't had to use all these draft assets you've accumulated to move up to get that pick. You just got it. And now you still have all these assets. Does that make you more likely to look at that pick at 16 and see what you can do to move up? And given all these guards who are still going to be there outside the top four, like I think it would be hard to probably get up to 6, 7, 8 when you're talking about Acuff, Fleming's, Wagler, maybe not, but like how much do they like Braden Burries? How much do they like Mikael Brown Jr.? How much do they like LeBaron Philon? It might be a lot easier to jump up and take a shot on one of those guys.
Yeah. What team do you think is is most likely to trade out if you're going to look at the way that this shook out with Dallas at 9, Milwaukee at 10, Golden State 11? That's probably where you're looking, right? The Thunder, maybe?
I mean, what's Milwaukee doing, right? Are they in a rebuild? Would they like to stack picks? Well, you fall from 10 to 16, you get another future pick because you're embarking on a rebuild, and maybe for them, the talent gap from 10 to 16 is not that big, and you get another pick to add to your cupboard because you've already traded away picks before. So, of course, they'll get some back if they trade Giannis. I mean, that's a team. You know, do players get involved if you're moving up, you know, that may have interest to people? I don't know. I haven't gone through it that much, but I just wonder, you have all these future picks as ammunition to trade up. 16, they traded up from 16 last year, by the way. They went from 16 to 11. They did that for a future first and 2 future seconds. So could you see a similar kind of move this year? I think they'll probably explore it at least.
Absolutely. We will be watching that 16 pick closely, I'm sure, because it does feel like every year they move. I know they moved in the Bane draft. They moved in the LaRavia Roddy draft.
Right.
They moved last year in the Coward draft. They
Yeah.
moved in the Zaire Williams draft. I don't know if there's many drafts that they haven't moved up.
Right. I mean,
You
even
know?
the Ja draft, they moved up because they moved up one spot to get Brandon Clark. You know, I mean,
That's right.
so they do have that history. And 16 is the kind of spot that's easy to move from because it did it last year, and they have the extra pick. So we'll see what they do. But I think the fact that you've banked that pick at 3, and the fact that the draft maybe it won't be like this, but I feel like the draft is not going to come to them in the way they want at 16. Because I think they'll look at 16 and they'll see the best players on the board are the same position maybe as whoever they took at 3, and maybe that gives you more incentive to try to move up.
We'll have a lot of
Yeah.
time and several weeks to discuss that as well. Did you have any other questions?
I got one more, and I mean, all this is super speculative, and so we're just now processing this. We're just a few hours after the lottery as we record. They're trying to trade John Morant this summer. I think we both know that. They've all but said this. There are people who look at this and say, you're going to draft, Boozer or Wilson. You got everything you need but a guard, except you have a guard, John Morant, let's go. And I just don't think that's going to be their attitude about it. So assuming A, do we still assume they're trying to trade John Morant? And then B, if so, do we have any, and I have a couple reactions, but any reaction to the way the lottery shook out in terms of how that might impact a Morant trade market? Would you agree they're still looking to trade John Morant?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned Milwaukee. I mean, you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
At 10. And I don't think you're going to be able to trade Josh straight up for the number 10 pick, but you got future assets that you could attach. You got the 16th pick. Maybe he wants maybe Taylor Jenkins is open to being reunited with John Morant in Milwaukee. Who knows what Milwaukee's trying to do? I don't have a ton of further thoughts because I think it's more likely that he's going to get traded after the draft, honestly. But
yeah, it could be.
We'll see.
I think this lottery, while certainly being overall a big, big positive for the Memphis Grizzlies, was, if anything, maybe a net negative for a John Morant trade market. Because if you had asked me before the lottery, teams I would speculate would make the most sense to maybe be on the other end of a Ja trade, 2 teams I would have said, one of which we know they talked to last year, Sacramento, and another team I would have said is Brooklyn. They both got pushed down, and they got pushed down into that point guard range. And so Brooklyn's now picking 6, and Sacramento's picking 7. If those teams are in the top four and they're taking a Wilson or Boozer or Dabansa, they're probably more likely to take a swing on a John Morant. But now they're picking 6 and 7, and they're like, okay, Keaton Wagler, Darius Acuff, Kingston Flemings. I feel like that might take those teams off the board. You only need one, although you'd prefer to have two. So you could create a market. It takes two to make a market. So maybe they can find a market there. But I think if you're trying to speculate on John Morant landing spots, I think this lottery takes away. This lottery would downgrade Sacramento and Brooklyn as potential John Morant landing spots. A team that jumped up is Chicago, who I would think might be a team that might take a swing. But I will note they have a new front office, and their new GM talked about getting bigger and stronger, which Zach Lyman's also talked about, by the way. And he's also said this is a rebuild, which also Zach Lyman has said. So I don't know if that's a team that is saying we're rebuilding people. Pay attention. This is a rebuild, and it's also saying we want to get bigger, stronger, and more physical. I don't know if that's a team that's trading for John Morant.
Yeah. I think you're dead on that. And that plus, I'd add, you're going to have a different lottery system next season.
Right.
So the likelihood Brooklyn and Sacramento are going to trade for, future draft assets in order to take on, some sort of jaw trade if you got that desperate is also less likely, I guess.
Right.
Maybe that's reaching a little bit, but
so I wonder, and we'll revisit this later along with the draft when we start talking about jaw trade stuff. I wonder if it's more likely going to be a team that's not really that's in a different category of team, right?
Well,
you talk about a Phoenix that's not in this draft. You talk about a Portland that's not in this draft. So these are teams that are not New Orleans that's not in this draft in terms of the first round. These are teams that are not addressing a point guard situation in the draft. And so maybe those are more the kind of teams.
Utah came out of nowhere on the Jaren trade, and it turns out Toronto sounds like was also interested, which they weren't on the radar either.
There was speculation about whether they would be interested in Ja. This is something we haven't talked about yet, but that was reported recently. There was speculation about whether they might be a Ja team. It turned out all along they were a Jaren team.
Yeah. So, really interesting the way that the lottery shook out. There's lots of other storylines we could talk about. Before we do that, I've got one question for you that I just thought of.
Yeah.
I know we're not doing like the player versus player breakdown, but if you were to go based off of Grizzlies' past draft history, what we know about Zach Lyman, is Cam Boozer the one that makes the most sense of the top group?
I think he does, and I think the fact that, as I sort of just alluded to a second ago, not only did Chicago GM come out and said we need to get more physical, Zach Lyman said that, I think it was a closed media session. He talked about needing to get bigger and stronger and more physical, which makes me think they're not going to do one of these guards up high. They're going to get, whether it's Boozer or Wilson or Peterson, they're going to get a bigger, more physical player, relative to the guards. To me, the only question is, there are teams out there. There are people out there who have Boozer rated very high. John Hollinger just put up his draft stuff last week. He is Boozer number 1 in the class. Lots of other people do. I'm sure there are teams that do, but there are people out there who think there's a real hard ceiling on him, and they look at someone like a Caleb Wilson, much less a Peterson or Dabansa, and just see more real star upside. And I don't know how Zach Lyman, or to a more point, the Grizzlies front office, that as opinions filter toward him to make a decision. I don't know where the room is going to be on that question. To me, it could go either way. I go both ways on it,
I think the real question is, will they look at this draft class different than they looked at it in the past when they weren't at this stage of their roster construction, right? Because they were very clearly for years there, it wasn't a guarantee, but they were in the market for productive, efficient college players, no matter the age, right? No matter whatever physical limitations they might have. And they drafted those types of players over and over and over again, whether it was Tillman or LaRavia or Roddy, or they had two instances in which they really, Edie for that matter, they had two instances in which they kind of went counter to that. It was Zaire Williams and Gigi Jackson, right? But now the question for me is, are they going to choose to look at this draft differently because they're not trying to find just a piece that fits in to what they already have on the team? They're trying to find the center of the team with this draft.
Yeah. I would say the thing about being in the top 4 of this draft is that it minimizes the degree you're making those choices because at the margins, yes, you could draw that line, and Boozer and Wilson seem to be on opposite sides of the line, like the super productive guy versus the
They're
the
both pretty
super
productive,
talent. They're
actually.
both pretty productive and they're
Yeah.
both pretty talented, and like you're kind of like there's a little bit of a degree of difference there, but like you're sort of getting a lot of everything with either of them.
You are splitting hairs a little bit, but Boozer
Right.
is like above and beyond like the analytics darling prospect here, for sure.
And Boozer's like a year younger than Caleb Wilson. Like I mean, what Boozer was doing relative to his age was, I mean, it's very similar to Cooper Flag, really, was pretty crazy stuff. But I think there are also people who look at it and look at the NCAA tournament run where he shot like 42% or whatever it was. It was getting shot blocked all the time by the center for Virginia, and I mean, I think there are real questions there. I think the Grizzlies ultimately will have to make a decision, and maybe it's a Boozer versus Wilson, but again, maybe Boozer's off the board, or maybe it's Peterson versus Wilson or something else. I think they're in a spot where they will feel relatively safe about all the options because all these guys are super good and have proven they're good already, and they have to decide who they think is most likely to be the best player. I think if they took Boozer at 3, it won't be, well, we're playing it safe. It will be, we're playing it safe, but also we think this guy's gonna be awesome.
No, for sure. And there will be people like I think if they take Wilson over Boozer, there will be less pushback than if they took Boozer over Wilson, because I think there's some folks that are going to look at Boozer and watch his college game and say, yawn, I wanted the more exciting player.
Right.
And so for that reason, it might be a little bit more controversial, I guess, to go with Boozer, although it really shouldn't be if you look at the numbers.
I
So it's
I
interesting how it'll pan out.
I felt a little rising tide over the last week or so back towards Boozer. Maybe it's just because I was sort of talking myself back into that. Although I really like Wilson and I have from the jump. By the way, the draft stuff that I wrote about, which we never talked about the bigs, is sort of funny. We talked about the guards and the wings. The one I published, I think Thursday on the bigs, I went into a lot of detail on both Boozer and Wilson. I wrote more about Boozer and Wilson than I did any other prospect in the draft in that series. And you can sort of feel, if you're reading between the lines, reading my stuff, you could probably feel me sort of moving towards both of those guys, frankly. I was toying with having those guys as my top 2 guys in this draft, above
Um,
Devanza and Peterson.
yeah. Well, as we said, we'll do the Boozer versus Wilson podcast later, but I will just say, if you go look at their statistical profiles, they are very similar. It's just Boozer has a slight edge on just about everything except for maybe blocks. Um,
Right.
so it's hard to go wrong with a guy that does everything well on the floor, and
Well,
both of those guys did pretty much everything well. So
let's end on that note. It's hard to go wrong. Again, no one can see the future. Things may turn out poorly. But jumping up to 3 in this draft, the Grizzlies are guaranteed to walk away with a player who has a very, very high likelihood to be a really, really good player and to be good to some degree next season. And I'm excited as a basketball fan who like watches every Grizzlies game, and it got rough to watch last season. I'm excited as a basketball fan who watches every Grizzlies game to have a team on the floor that really has some real serious building blocks to building a really interesting, serious team. Whoever they take in this draft, plus a Coward, plus an Edie, I think if they end up taking one of those forwards, that's more likely Ty Jerome is back to start the season with the team, and I kind of like that. I just think they have a chance to have a really interesting team from day one next season, and one that has a chance to really build over the next few years.
yeah, and a lot of draft picks, a lot of
Yeah,
draft picks in the future too. Good assets on the horizon. I agree with everything you just said, and I think if you put Cam Boozer, Ty Jerome, Zach Edey, Cedric Coward on the floor together to start a season, like
that's a real basketball team.
that's a real competitive basketball team. Now they got to
Yeah,
stay healthy to be able to do it,
right.
but it really did feel like all the rainy days happened from the trade deadline until Sunday, May the 10th, and then the sun finally came out for the Memphis Grizzlies with this draft pick.
Yeah.
And you didn't even have to wait until the top four was announced to celebrate. You just knew you probably got a player that's going to have a chance to be an all-star level player. And you've got all-star level talent on the way out. How do you fix it? You bring all-star level talent in. And that's what they're going to have an opportunity to draft in front of them. So very big deal, worth the wait, I think, for some Grizzlies fans, and we'll see exactly what happens. You and I will be at the lottery, or not? Excuse me, not the lottery, the combine here in a couple of days. So we'll get to talk to some of these guys and see where everybody's heads at. But what a fun day! And I thought just the lottery in general uh, shook out pretty interesting because you had Utah and Memphis, the teams that played in the battle of the century or whatever they were calling it at the end of the year, and the Windhorse was on ESPN saying that it was going to be a disgrace to basketball, and yet those two teams that were
That's right.
how about that, conspiracy theorists?
The lottery, there's Exhibit A. The lottery is not rigged. There was no punishment.
The two teams that the NBA should be the most furious at end up in the top three.
Right.
And Utah actually got their lottery combination pulled twice, as you mentioned earlier. So
Yeah.
there you go.
They got in while the getting was good. They tanked their way to some really good picks, some really good draft, and now the rules will change more than likely.
Chicago, who was the team you were worried might catch the the Grizzlies, excuse me.
Yeah.
My head is scrambled. In the tank race at the end of the season, Chicago instead does the opposite. They do a terrible job of tanking, and they get rewarded with a top four pick. So congratulations, Chicago. You did it wrong, and you still got it right.
I mean, we want more talent going east anyway. I think, it's been a long time since the Bulls were super relevant, and that should be one of the marquee franchises in the league. And so they finally they fired the front office. They're gonna have a new front office. They'll have a new head coach. They jumped up and got a top four pick. Maybe they can get something going in Chicago.
Indiana, rough.
Yeah, that's rough. Did you see that Kevin Pritchard went on Elon Musk X.com and apologized to the Pacers fans?
Yeah, I saw it. I actually found it I give him some credit for doing so.
I had to check and make sure it wasn't a parody account. I was so surprised to see that happen.
I mean, he screwed up clearly.
I think so, but it's kind of weird because you knew that this was like a 50-50 chance when you made the trade, basically, that this might happen. So I don't know why you should be surprised that this happened. You knew the risk you were taking when you did the trade.
It was a high risk, high reward proposition, and you lost it.
I mean, they did add a really good center to a team that has a chance to come out of the East next year.
Yeah, you sent Matherin out. It's just
right. No, I
gave up an awful lot.
No, I agree. It was not a good trade, and I didn't think it was good when they did it. But they're still going to be a good basketball team next year. I thought, but I was hoping. I didn't want the Clippers getting a top 5 pick, and I kind of liked the Pacers. So I was disappointed the Pacers were a team that fell down. I'm glad they fell down, in deference to your Memphis Grizzlies, but.
What did the Clippers do at 5? Now that I'm thinking about it, they just traded for Darius Garland.
They just traded for Garland. I mean, I think Wagler's somebody people will look at because he has the size and the shooting to play off ball. But that'd be a rough defensive backcourt,
Are the Bulls going to be tempted to take Wagler at 4? Illinois.
I don't think. I mean, he's from Kansas, so he played 1 year at Illinois. I don't. He's not like Derrick Rose. He's not a hometown kid, so I don't think so.
Brooklyn and Sacramento, boy, rough for Brooklyn. The Kings kind of deserved it because they tanked terribly. They did a bad job of tanking. So I'm saying that they deserve to move down 2 spots and be at number 7. But their misfortune continues. And I was kind of glad that New Orleans, who did the Grizzlies a solid at the end of the season by going ahead and finishing above the Grizzlies in the standings and did just enough to get there. New Orleans ends up at number 8, and so they don't end up having to give a top 3 pick to Atlanta. I was kind of happy for them.
Yeah, I was more pleased to see Dallas move down a spot instead of jumping up. I did not want to see Dallas jump up into the top 4. You have Cooper Flag. No more good luck for you.
And then the OKC thing was a sigh of relief. We didn't need that. That was the last thing that we needed.
Yeah,
So,
and they're in an interesting spot. I mean, they're in a great spot because they're the best team in basketball, but they get too many players already, and now you have 12 and 17. That's the thing about getting all these picks. Like at some point, they start to lose their value a little bit because you can't roster all these guys. And so, it'll be interesting to see how the Grizzlies sort of handle that going forward. But I don't know. Something's gonna have to move in OKC because I don't think they could put these two guys on the roster right now. They got too
yeah,
many good players already.
yeah. I wonder how they're going to be able to afford two more contracts of.
Hey, put a pin in this for a discussion later in the pod this summer because we need to find stuff to talk about the rest of the summer. How many future picks would you trade for AJ Mitchell if you're not getting your guard in the top four?
A
I'm
lot.
not looking for an answer now. I'm just saying, stick a pin in that.
Probably a lot. He's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was a fun day, a great day for the Memphis Grizzlies. Cause for celebration. And it was quite the TV experience. I've been saying that it was also Mother's Day, and we were celebrating our first Mother's Day. I can't say that my wife really wanted to be celebrating Mother's Day by watching the NBA draft lottery on TV. That probably wasn't her favorite thing, but ever since my kid was born, I've been calling her my lucky baby because she turned the Bears season around. The Cubs started with the best record in Major League Baseball.
She's on a winning streak.
She's red hot,
Are
and
you
so
taking?
as the lottery,
Are you going to take her to Tunica?
I don't think I might have to sneak her in if I
Okay.
can. Or I don't even think I have to go that far. I can go to Southland now across the river. But no, I've been calling her my lucky baby, and I was like, Jess, hold the baby up at the TV. Hold the baby up at the TV. Let's see what happens here. Boom, Grizzlies top 3 pick. You never doubt the powers of the lucky baby. So what a fun day that was. And how did you watch, Chris? What was your viewing experience?
I took a break from a day of cooking to go down to the basement to the TV room and watch. My wife celebrated Mother's Day by throwing me in the kitchen all day. I cooked for 8, her mother and her sister and our sister-in-law. So we had 4 mothers in the house, and I was cooking for all of them today.
Very nice. What'd you make?
We had a taco bar. I made
Okay.
I made carnitas. I made everything from scratch. I made carnitas. I did fried tilapia for fish tacos. I made black beans, Mexican rice. I made a guacamole with roasted corn.
Did you pick some of these items from your garden in the back of your
No,
house?
no, it's too soon for that. I mean, it's just now, it's barely above 50 degrees right now. But I did plant this weekend, and I did plant some tomatillos. So I'm hoping to be able to make salsa verde from my own garden at the end of the summer. But I was store bought today. I made a salsa verde to go with the pork.
You don't have like herbs and stuff back there?
Oh, I do. I use a little bit of thyme from the garden, but
There
it's
you
still
go.
it's still early. The gardens are just getting started up here.
That counts. That counts. I'll count it. All right. Well, we'll be back maybe later this week, probably next week. We will be in Chicago talking to some of these guys. Follow our work over at the Daily Memphian. Go read Chris's column from Lottery Day. Read my story about how it all unfolded on television. And we'll be back. Until next time, we're out of here.